Alright guys, you join me here today in the car that I've already featured in my channel before. So this is the 405 Mi16, and I will be comparing this car with another car today, which you will see right now on my left. You see that white car right there? That is a Toyota Corolla AE92 GTi. So why am I comparing these two cars? I mean, first of all, from what I know, based on my limited internet research, no one has compared these two cars before. But being situated here in Thailand, both of these cars were competing in the same segment when they came out. So the Mi16, the first year this car came out was in 1987, which happens to be the same year as the Corolla GTi. The same year. Both of these cars were considered as front-wheel drive sports sedans. So they are indeed competing in the same segment. And I'm really curious to compare these two cars, because on one hand you have what some might say the king of front-wheel drive sedans. The Peugeots of the 90s, the early 90s, were really well known for the front-wheel driving dynamics. But recently, the AE92 GTi have been slowly creeping up in value, and people are starting to appreciate them more. Before that, these cars, the AE92, they were relatively underappreciated cars. You could get one for basically a quarter of the price of this car. Does the AE92 GTi deserve the GTi badge, or should it forfeit the badge and give it to the Mi16? Because as you know, the Peugeot 405 never came with the GTi badge. Or maybe I might say that actually the Corolla GTi has been underappreciated, and that people should start buying them as soon as possible. So before I start doing the comparison, I kind of just want to start off with driving the 405 so I can get a refresher to see what it's like to drive. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't driven the Corolla GTi yet. I've been saving my first impression for this video. So whatever my first impressions will be when driving that car will be the genuine one. So let's talk about the similarities between these two cars. I mean, I did mention, first of all, they both came out around the same year, and that both of these cars have a 4-cylinder front-wheel drive layout. And both of these were marketed as sport sedans. And the other similarity, which I think is uncanny, are the seats, the fabrics in both cars. They look almost identical. So right now I'm going to pull up two pictures. Can you tell which fabric belongs to which car? Yeah, most people cannot. So, I mean, it almost makes it seem like one car is trying to copy the other. And that might not be the fact, but it really does seem like that way. On paper, it seems like the Corolla should be more of a purist car. It should be more raw, because it's a smaller car. The wheelbase, if you line both cars side by side, you will see that actually the Corolla is about maybe 15 centimeters shorter, and that might translate to a better turn-in or better responsiveness of the chassis. And also, the 405 comes with power steering, but the Corolla GTi has manual steering. It has a manual rack. So that should be more of a purist choice. And then lastly, the Corolla is significantly lighter than the 405. it's lighter by about 150 kilos. So that's like having two guys sitting in your car. But right now I'm driving the 405, and I have to say, I cannot see how the Corolla GTi can be better than this. All of the driving inputs are just so nice in this car. I mean, the steering is very light, but it's not so light that it becomes imprecise. You can still get tons of road feel. You can feel the engine as well, and it has really good turn-in. I don't know how the Corolla can compete with that. The shifter is not too long and not too short, and also a little bit on the notchy side, but it's not so notchy that you feel like you are punching in the gears. You are still able to slide it into gears. So I would say it's on the borderline of being too notchy, but at the same time, I'm not really complaining about how it shifts because it's so precise. Let's talk about power. So this has a 2-liter 16-valve engine, whereas the Corolla has a 1.6 16-valve engine. It's the 4AGE engine, which everyone knows. It's really well known. And if we look at brake power per ton, there's about a 10 to 15 horsepower brake power per ton difference between these two cars. The more powerful one being the 405. But 10 to 15 horsepower per ton is not really a big deal. So I would be expecting both cars to feel quite similar in terms of speed. And then the suspension. This is quite interesting because the rear suspension on the Corolla is more sophisticated. It has a multi-link rear, whereas this car is like a solid beam. It's a torsion bar. So in theory, the Corolla should be more capable. But this is rarely the case when you talk about classic cars. You look at cars that have a sophisticated suspension which don't drive as well, and some cars with really rudimentary like solid rear axles, leaf spring suspension cars. Some of them actually drive really well and quite fun. So it's really hard to judge. You really have to drive it to come up with any kind of conclusion. Now about the weight distribution, of course I'm not able to measure any difference. I don't have the equipment, but if you look at the engine bay of both of these cars, you can see that I think Peugeot put more thought into managing the weight distribution more towards the center of the car. First of all, the engine is mounted more inboard towards the center, and also it is angled where the 4AG is not. And also the battery on the Peugeot is further in, and the battery on the Toyota is further out towards the front of the car, which will definitely kind of spoil the weight distribution. The characteristic of this car is there's almost no power all the way until like 4005, and then the power comes on after that. So it's a very peaky motor, and if I have to guess, I think the 4AG will feel quite similar because it has a smaller displacement. It revs to I think almost 8,000, that car. So my hypothesis is, I mean, just based on the specs, the Corolla should feel more raw, but I think the driving feel, I don't think it can beat the 405. I just really don't see that because most Japanese cars don't have the best driving feel. Let's see let's see how it goes. So if I have to sum up what the 405 is like to drive, I will say that excellent driving feel. It feels very light on its feet. It's very easy to drive. It has excellent suspension. It's perfect for city roads. And it feels very peaky. All of its power is up top. These are kind of the main points that I can draw from the 405. Now I'm very curious to hop into the Corolla and have a direct comparison between these two cars. Okay, now we are going to Corolla GT Twin Cam 16, and you can tell it's a GTi by the sticker here on the side. The I stands for injection. You see, this is what I said. The seats, they look similar, but I like the form factor of these seats better. I think the Corolla has a sportier seat. It just looks way cooler. So let's start her up. Maybe I should. Yeah, that's one thing I like about these old Japanese cars. They give you a coin holder. Maybe I should I'll just leave it here. Put it back later. Rin, if I forget it, I owe you 20, 30, 32 baht. Okay? Oh, this dashboard is super cool. It's almost like a jet. You have these 7 dials which span halfway across the dashboard. Oh, and the shifters, I like this. This is how I judge if a car has a good shifting, is if I can do this, touch both the steering wheel and the shifter, then it's a relatively good shifter position. But one thing that you will see is that the throws are much longer. From 3rd to 4th, let's see, that's like 15, 20 centimeters, maybe 20 centimeters. That's quite long. Yeah, 20 centimeters is long. Okay, let's start her up. I think the fuel filter needs to be changed. Takes a while to start. Wow, okay, but immediately you tell this engine is much more responsive. That could be due to the fact that it's a 1.6 instead of a 2.0, or it could be due to the engine management system. In the 405 you have a airflow meter, which is like one of those flappy vanes. This car doesn't use that. It's more high-tech. Wow, I love the responsiveness of this. It's so much nicer than the 405. Okay, enough revving. Actually, you know, both cars are quite similar in terms of interior styling. It's got a lot of plastics, but maybe it's just a 90s thing. I like it. Very, very simple. I like how the mirror adjustments are over here, and they conveniently flipped it upside down so it's easier to read. And this radio, I suppose it's original. Very nice. AC is pretty cold. Let me adjust the seats. The seating position in this is I think a bit lower than the 405, which I prefer. That's 2 upright. Okay. There is steering wheel adjustment. Oh, okay. Oh, it only goes up and down. Yeah. Manual steering, nice and heavy, nice. Pedal feel, Pedal feel is nice. Everything feels tight. Clutch is tight. Brake is pretty nice and tight. Easy to heel toe. Alright. No central locking. Oh yeah, it does have, okay, my bad. There is central locking, you just have to press the button, dummy. The clutch pedal is much longer, much more travel than the 405. But the throttle pedal on both cars, very short. I'd say it's only maybe 8 centimeters of movement, very short. Alright, let's get going. Oh, okay. I'm liking this car already. Just reversing. Steering becomes light almost immediately once you start moving. But when you're like this, it's a bit heavy. Wow, this car is... I'm liking it already. This engine is so much peppier. There's some slack in the drivetrain here. It needs to be addressed. Maybe the drive shaft or something. But I like this engine just at low speeds. I like this engine more. The steering is quite heavy actually. Not sure if the alignment is correct. A lot more body roll. I did not expect that. And a lot less power than the 405. A lot less. But that might be because I haven't reached into its peak power yet. Just now I only went up to around 3,500. I can hear several noises coming from the suspension, so Rin and Victor, you need to probably change all the bushings. Hey, it's really not bad. But just as I expected, the steering is very numb compared to the 405. There's a lot going on. You can feel a lot of vibration, but you cannot feel the road. I think the vibration is just coming from the engine's vibration, but road feel is not quite there. The 405 is so much more talkative, if you will. I like the sound of this engine more though. It sounds better than the 405. Suspension is definitely softer, more compliant, but it comes at a cost of a lot more body roll, a lot. Yeah, it's wow. This engine is even peakier than the Mi16. It starts to come alive at around 5,000, a little bit past 5,000. I can see why this car has a cult following. It's pretty raw. I just wish that the steering could be better. Right now, I don't mind the shifter so much. The long throws are okay. It's not bad. Let's see, rev matching. Easy. Peach. So I guess you just have to keep it above 4,000 when you're driving. I don't like to keep my cars in the higher rev range. I feel like maybe I have too much mechanical sympathy. But in this car, I think it's the only way to drive it, is to keep it high in the rev range. What the hell is this guy doing, man? Get out the way. once you're going, it really comes alive. Not the best day to be driving, not the best time to be driving, lots of traffic. But I'll do my best. Not bad, the cornering. I mean, obviously I gotta test it more. I've seen that car, the E90 there. That car is for sale. It's not a real M3, that car. I think it has the 335 engine in it. It's a fake M3, but it looks cool. Oh, okay. This car really loads up. Like, the steering weight really loads up when you turn in. Whereas the 405, it feels more delicate. It's very light and it's more immediate. This car, yeah, the turn-in is nowhere as good as the 405. So that's for turn-in. I want to see what it's like in the mid to high speed corners in terms of stability. It should not be as good as the 405. I really don't think so. At the moment, I'm not seeing any advantage of the shorter wheelbase and any advantage of the multi-link rear suspension. I just don't feel it. It's not selling. I think by far the best part of this car so far is the engine. It's very sweet. Very, very sweet. So responsive. Whoa. Makes like a hissing sound once you reach 5,000. It's pretty cool. I'm not sure if that's normal, but pretty cool. Alright. Oh, lots of understeer. Oh, 405 is so much more composed. This car becomes kind of scary. The whole body twists. Yeah, the bump stops are gone. Rin, you need new bump stops. I think a set of aftermarket coilovers on this car would really help. I think part of the reason why the turn-in on this is not so good is not because of the steering geometry, but because of how soft the suspension is. When you turn, it takes a while for the weight transfer to happen. Yeah, you see? It takes like almost 2 seconds for the car to settle after you turn. That's not very good. But apart from that, this engine, oh, I love this engine, it's so good. I see why it's so famous, the 4AG. Ah, come on, it's so good. Pretty stable at high speeds, no wobble. No ABS, brakes pretty straight. Such a peach, this engine. Turn-in is really bad. It's like the first 5 degrees of movement, you get nothing. And then it turns all of a sudden. Whoops, I indicated. So manual steering on this car isn't really doing it any doing justice. In most cases, you want manual steering for the extra feel, but on this car you don't really get it, which is a bit of a shame. I feel like it's holding it back as well. If this car had a powered steering with similar feel to the current one, I think I would prefer it to have power steering. However, I have tried a Corolla GTi, which was fitted with an aftermarket power steering unit, and that power steering made the car even worse. It was terrible. Oh, this engine is so good. So good. Love it. I thought I was totally prepared to roast this car, you know. I had a conclusion written out in my head, which basically is gonna say that, yeah, the 405 Mi16 should just take the GTi badge off of the AE92. The AE92 GTi does not deserve the GTi badge. That was what I had in my mind. That was my my hypothesis, I guess. But after driving it, both cars have its flaws, and driving both cars, each car exposes the other car's flaws even more. Now, if I can combine both of the good aspects of these cars into one car, that would be absolutely amazing. But this engine is just so good, but it's being let down by the suspension. And maybe it's because of the current state of this car, because this is an old car. Maybe after the suspension overhaul, because I know that the 405 Mi16, all of the suspension components are pretty much brand new. It's been overhauled very recently, I think like last year, and this might not be a fair test. Alright, before I call an end to this video, I just want to insert this additional little segment. I have been driving the car a little bit more after filming the video just now, and I made a few more additional observations about this car, which I really want to point out. You know, when you like swap from one car to another car, it takes a little while for your muscle memory to calibrate to the newer car, and I want to point out maybe some things that I missed out during the first test drive. I want to talk about the shifter in particular. So I sort of made fun of it initially, but you know, the more I drive it, I think this is the better shifter compared to the 405. This is like watching Ip Man doing Wing Chun. It's so easy to shift. Look, I can go like any gear at any speed. It's long, but it's fast. It's long but fast, and so it's so lovely to shift. And I find myself shifting much more often when I'm driving this car, just because of the added confidence of the shift action. Maybe the cables can be tightened a little bit, but other than that, I literally have no complaints about this shifter. All the pedals, the pedal feel on this car is just excellent. Heel and towing is so much easier than the 405 that I find myself rev matching a lot more of the times than the 405. The engine, coming back to the engine, which I did say previously that it's probably the highlight of this car. I noticed one thing about this engine is that it's a lot more refined. At higher revs, it's smoother than the 405. On the 405, once the revs start going up, you start to feel like the buzziness coming from the engine. And you might associate buzziness with refinement, because if the engine is well balanced, it shouldn't really buzz. It should be very smooth. So when I'm driving this car, I'm using higher revs more of the time. I don't have that mechanical sympathy that I have for the 405, where I feel like once it starts buzzing, I should probably shift up to bring the vibration levels back down. On this car, I can stay at 5,000 and it feels comfortable. And because of that, I'm able to take advantage of the power band much more often compared to the 405. Even though I know on the 405 I should probably keep it 4,000 and above, I find myself not doing that most of the time, just because the buzziness of the engine kind of unconsciously makes me want to shift up because of my built-in mechanical sympathy for the car. And because of that, I drive this car much harder, and I'm having fun maybe a little bit more than the 405. So the only downside of this car at the moment is the suspension and the steering, which I think can be remedied once the bushings are replaced, the suspension components replaced. And so, to conclude, I really think that this car, it really deserves the GTi badge. It deserves the GTi name. Does the Mi16 deserve to take the GTi badge from this car? No, I don't think so. Both cars have its merits, and both cars have its weaknesses. At the end of the day, which car would I prefer? I want to have both cars in my collection if possible. Both of them are good. Which car do I feel more confident driving? That depends. But when it's like high-speed cornering, if it's all about cornering, I would pick the 405. But if it's in-town urban driving where there's traffic and you just have to find the gaps and do a lot of shifting, I think I would prefer this car. But I should give the owners of this car a chance to overhaul the suspension and then probably do the comparison one more time, because I suspect once the suspension has been overhauled and fixed, I think the differences between this car and the 405 will be very hard to pick apart. So yeah, I'm calling it. I'm gonna say it's a status quo. Both cars deserve to be remembered. However, does the Mi16 deserve to be 4 times the price of the Corolla? Probably not. I think if both cars are sorted very well, I think they should fetch around the same price, which is kind of unfair to this car because right now it's bloody cheap. You can get one of these for 80,000 baht, whereas the Mi16, I know one that just sold for 400,000 baht, so that's 5 times the price. It's not worth it. Honestly, it's not worth it. If you get one of these, you sort it out, spend a little bit on upgrading the suspension, it might even be better than the Mi16. Might be better. Alright, that's it. So I hope this clears things up for people who are shopping for a front-wheel drive sports sedan from the 90s. Yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.